I hadn't planned on stopping. My truck gave out 2 blocks back, just sputtered to a halt at a red light like it decided it had enough. I sat there for a minute, hazard lights blinking, thumbing through the glove box for the number of the local shop. When they said the tow would take 40 minutes, I sighed, stepped out, and looked around. That's when I noticed the place, a book cafe tucked between a florist and an antique store with wind chimes dangling outside. Quiet. Out of the way. The kind of place you don't notice unless you're walking slow, which apparently I was now forced to do. I figured I'd K*LL time with a coffee, maybe browse. I hadn't been in a bookstore in months, not since before things got weird at home. Even then, it had been Laura dragging me into some chain place with LED signs and $7 lattes. This one felt different, smelled like dust, old bindings, cinnamon, and something warm. Like childhood. I walked past a display of journals and into the travel section. The covers caught my eye, photographs of turquoise beaches, cobbled alleyways, train maps of European coastlines. Portugal, Greece, Argentina. Places Laura and I used to talk about visiting back when we thought money was just a temporary problem. Back before her job started swallowing her time and before I started pretending not to notice. I'd stand in the kitchen on Friday nights with a pizza box waiting for her to get home from client meetings that kept getting later and later. We used to joke about eating street food in Bangkok. She hadn't said anything like that in almost a year. I picked up a guidebook on Morocco just to remember the way she lit up when she talked about the markets and the colors and how she wanted to ride a camel. I smiled faintly, painfully. I missed that version of her. Or maybe just the idea of her. Then it happened. A laugh cut through the quiet like a needle through silk. It wasn't loud, but I knew it. I felt it. It was Laura's. I froze. Turned my head toward the sound like a compass finding north. My heart skipped. My ears buzzed. Couldn't be her. She said she had a lunch meeting 2 towns over. Some client pitch, something she'd brushed off this morning while tying her hair into a loose bun, barely glancing at me. I inched toward the cafe, half of the shop, heart thudding with a beat I didn't understand. A row of cookbooks blocked most of my view, but the laughter came again. Then her voice. So I literally slipped out of his bed at 6 a.m. and by 7 my husband was kissing me goodbye like nothing ever happened. There was a beat. Then the women at her table burst into laughter. Loud, unfiltered, unbothered. He thinks I was at that hotel conference, she added, her tone light, too light. Almost smug. I didn't breathe. I don't think I could have even if I tried. My fingers curled into the spine of the book I was holding, backpacking northern Italy, and suddenly I couldn't remember why I picked it up. My stomach nodded like it had braced for impact. Because that wasn't a joke. I know her jokes. I've heard her exaggerate stories to make people laugh. But this? This wasn't one of those. She sounded proud. Untouchable. Like the story wasn't a confession but a trophy. I stepped closer. She sat at a high table with 2 other women I didn't recognize. They had the polished look of people who brunch often, layered necklaces, perfect eyebrows, oversized sunglasses pushed into their hair. Laura was in the middle, a latte in her hand, laughing as she waved off whatever one of them had said next. I should have turned away. I should have walked out, gone back to the truck and pretended I never heard a thing. But I couldn't. My feet were cement. My chest felt too tight. My mouth was dry. And still I watched even as my brain begged me not to. Then, like a bad scene in a movie, Laura turned. I didn't move fast enough. Our eyes locked. A second. 2. Enough for her to see it. I had heard every word. She blinked. Smiled faintly. Raised her hand in a wave. Like we just run into each other at the grocery store. Like I hadn't just overheard her describing how she cheated on me. That smile, God, that smile. It wasn't guilt or panic. It wasn't even regret. It said, "You heard that, didn't you?" I didn't wave back. I didn't do anything. I just stood there, trying to make the math work in my head. Trying to line up the person sitting there sipping iced coffee with the woman I kissed goodbye this morning. Then she got up. Smooth, unhurried. Said something to her friends I think I heard, "Be right back," and made her way toward me like it was any other Saturday. "Hey babe," she chirped as if she hadn't just detonated my entire sense of reality. "What are you doing here?" "Melissa invited me for coffee." "Funny running into you." I looked at her. She wore a light blue blouse I hadn't seen before, tucked into white jeans. She looked amazing. Happy. Relaxed. Like someone who'd slept in a bed that wasn't mine and had no intention of saying sorry. "That story," she said, laughing softly and brushing her hair behind her ear. "Oh God, did you hear that?" I was totally making that up. Just trying to get a laugh out of Melissa and Katie. You know how I joke. I nodded slowly. My lips moved into a shape that resembled a smile, but it wasn't mine. It was something I borrowed. Something people wear when they're trying not to shatter in public. Sure, I said, voice thin. Just a joke. She reached for my arm, squeezed lightly. You look pale. You okay? I almost said something then. Almost told her that my heart felt like it had been gutted, that my hands were still trembling inside my pockets, that I wanted to scream. But instead I said, truck died. Just K***ling time. Oh no, she said. You should have texted. I would have waited with you. I wanted to laugh at that. But I didn't. She leaned in and kissed my cheek. I'll be done here in a bit, okay? Don't worry. Just a dumb story. I promise. Then she walked back to her table like nothing happened. And me? I stood there in that aisle surrounded by places we never went, in a bookstore we never planned to find, and felt something inside me, something I didn't even know had a name, split. It didn't feel like a clean break. More like a hairline fracture in the center of my chest. Subtle. Dangerous. The kind that doesn't show up until it's too late to fix. I put the book back on the shelf, walked out into the sun, and waited for the tow truck. But the damage was already done. After that day, nothing looked the same. At first, I tried to brush it off, chalk the whole thing up to a misheard joke, a misunderstanding. But you don't forget something like that. It doesn't just fade. It sits with you. It roots itself into the cracks of your day and whispers in the quiet moments. And the more I tried to act normal, the more I realized how much wasn't. It started small. Laura's schedule, for one, seemed to get busier. More overnight trips. More conferences. She worked in regional sales for small appliances, blenders, toasters, countertop ovens. Not exactly the kind of job that required flights to cities she couldn't pronounce 2 months ago. Still, she started rattling off hotel names, new colleagues, workshops, and quarterly rollouts. Things she'd never mentioned before. One Thursday night, she called from a Marriott to say the meeting ran late and she was staying another night. She said it so casually, like I'd always known she was out of town. Thing is, I hadn't even noticed she'd packed. I opened our closet. Her suitcase was gone. Neatly. Quietly. Like she'd planned it in a parallel life I hadn't been invited into. When she came home 2 days later, her hair smelled like a perfume I'd never smelled on her before. She hugged me like it was habit, not want. Her eyes scanned the kitchen like she'd forgotten the shape of our home. You okay? I asked, handing her a cup of coffee. She blinked, surprised. Yeah. Just tired. That seminar was brutal. Then she smiled, that same faint smile from the cafe. It wasn't guilty. It was polished. After that, I started noticing things I never had time to notice before. Her phone, for one, always with her now. Even in the bathroom. Even in the shower, wrapped in a towel on the sink. Silent. Locked. Flipped face down on every surface. She used to leave it on the charger all night, wide open. Now, if I even glanced at the screen, she flinched. One morning, she left for work early, said she had a 7 o'clock meeting. I went to make the bed and found the charger still warm. Like the phone had been in her hand until the last possible second. Then there were the clothes. I found a dry cleaning receipt in the trash one afternoon while looking for an envelope. A silk blouse from a designer I knew we couldn't afford, especially on her self-reported budget. A navy wrap dress with a slit up the side. Labeled press only. When I asked about it, she waved it off. Oh, those? We borrowed some things for a shoot at work. They'll get returned next week. Shoot? At a blender company? I didn't argue. I just nodded and took another sip of my coffee. She started singing around the house again. That used to make me happy. But now it was always something new, unfamiliar, pop songs in Spanish, soft indie ballads by artists I'd never heard of. When I asked where she found them, she shrugged. Spotify playlist. Probably something random. I downloaded the app, tried to track what she was listening to. Her profile was set to private. That wasn't new. But it suddenly felt intentional. She came home late twice in 1 week, claiming traffic or drinks with Melissa. Once she forgot and said she was at a networking dinner. Melissa later posted pictures from a dog park that night. No mention of Laura. I didn't say anything. Not yet. But I started a folder. Nothing dramatic. Just notes on my phone. Timestamps. Gaps. Hotel names she mentioned in passing. I wrote down when her scent changed, when she started buying new makeup, when she came home smiling at nothing. One morning, I watched her from across the room as she stirred cream into her coffee. Her movements were light, effortless, almost rehearsed. She kissed me on the cheek and said, "Have a good day, babe," like she meant it. But I felt nothing in it. No spark. No want. That was the worst part, how normal she acted. Like everything was fine. But her eyes weren't with me. They looked past me. Through me. The bed felt colder, too. She always slept facing the wall now, cradling her phone under the pillow. If I reached for her, she'd shift, mumble something about being tired, and roll away. One night I couldn't sleep and walked out to the kitchen for water. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She'd finally left it behind. I glanced. No name. Just a preview of a message. Had a dream about you last night. Still smiling, smiley face. My stomach dropped. I didn't touch it. Didn't unlock it. I just stood there, glass in hand, reading that message over and over until it blurred. She didn't mention it the next morning. Neither did I. But I noticed she kept her phone on her at all times after that. I tried to convince myself I was being paranoid. That maybe I was overthinking. That I was seeing shadows where there weren't any. But every time I tried to push the doubt down, it came back stronger. The scent on her coat was cologne, not hers. Her earrings changed. Her lipstick changed. She bought new lingerie I never saw her wear at home. When I asked about it, casually, like a joke, she said it was just retail therapy. Then she kissed my forehead and said, "You worry too much." I stopped asking after that. But I started paying attention. She claimed to be in St. Louis for 3 days, but her location on our shared Find My iPhone was disabled. Must be a glitch, she said. A glitch. That word rattled around in my head until I started seeing our whole life that way. A glitch. Something corrupted. Something out of sync. I found one of those hotel notepads tucked into her tote bag, a scribbled room number and initials I didn't recognize, MB 513. She said it was left over from a team retreat. We were splitting rooms, she said. Nothing fancy. I asked where. She said Kansas City. The pad said Ocean View Suites, room 513. That was in California. I Googled it. Luxury seaside hotel. $500 a night minimum. And still, she smiled. She joked. She kissed me hello and goodbye like nothing had changed. But I felt it in my bones. Something had. I started watching her when she didn't know I was watching. One morning, she sat on the edge of the bed, legs crossed, scrolling through her phone. Her lips curled into a smile so small I almost missed it. She tucked her hair behind her ear, tilted her head slightly, and typed something quickly. That smile? I used to be the reason for that smile. Now it belonged to someone else. I told Laura I had to work late. It was a Thursday, the kind of Thursday where the sky stays gray and your gut doesn't settle. I kissed her on the forehead that morning and said, "I've got a warehouse meeting after hours, probably won't be back until 10. She nodded, barely looking up from her phone, already halfway out the door. She never questioned it. She said she was going to Cincinnati. Product Expo. Lots of mingling. I won't have much time to call, but I'll text you goodnight. I waited until she pulled away in the rented sedan, something new, something she said her company was covering for mileage and discretion. Then I packed a thermos, filled the tank, and followed. It wasn't hard. She took the back roads. Avoided the interstate. That told me everything I needed to know. No one takes scenic routes to a corporate expo unless they're hiding something. I kept a few cars behind. Close enough to track her, far enough not to catch her eye. I tailed her for over an hour. She didn't head to Cincinnati. She drove west, toward the lake, an old coastal town where people go to unplug, to disappear. The kind of place with white fences and long porches and rental homes with names like Seabreeze or the Captain's Retreat. I passed signs for antique shops, saltwater taffy, and fishing charters. Then I saw it. She pulled into a driveway hidden just enough behind a manicured row of hedges. The house was 2 stories, seafoam green with a wraparound deck. A white Audi was already there, parked in the shade like it belonged. He came out before she could knock. Tall, business casual, confident in that unbothered kind of way. Salt and pepper hair. A crisp, unbranded polo. No tie. He walked right up to her, smiled like this was routine, and kissed her, not a cheek peck. Not a casual hug. A kiss like they'd been counting down the hours. She leaned into it. No hesitation. I didn't confront them. I parked down the street, behind a row of low-sitting pine trees, and watched. They carried in groceries together. A baguette stuck out of the top like a prop. She laughed at something he said as she locked the door behind them. I sat in my truck for another hour. My hands didn't shake. My chest didn't heave. It was worse than that. It was stillness, like a clock that stopped ticking. I felt something freeze over inside me. When I got home that night, I didn't turn on the lights. I walked straight to the bathroom, washed my face, and stared at myself in the mirror. I looked normal. Just a man. Just a husband. But I didn't recognize my own reflection. For the next 3 days, I unraveled the rest. I started with the credit card bills. I'd never paid them much attention before, we split most things, and she always insisted on paying hers. but her online statement was still linked to our shared budget app. Boutique hotel charges. Restaurants with $2 signs next to the names. Spa visits during weeks she was supposedly at conferences. One receipt made me stop breathing. Ocean View Suites, 3 nights. Name on file, Laura E. Holloway. Guest name, L. Easton, maiden name. I stared at that name. It felt like a ghost from a past she was trying to reclaim without me in it. Next, I checked the smart home system. She had disabled the security cameras several times in the last 4 months, always during trips she claimed were off the grid. I almost let it go. But the log showed an error on one random Thursday in April. One morning the camera hadn't shut off like she meant it to. I found a 36-second clip. Laura walking out the front door at 5:43 a.m., heels in hand, dress wrinkled, makeup smudged. Not leaving for work. Not dressed for any expo. Same dress she'd worn in the cafe the day I found her. I replayed it 3 times. It wasn't just a one-time slip. She wasn't lying on impulse. She'd built a second life. A second story. And I had been the background noise. That Sunday she came home from another conference. I watched her unpack. She hummed a tune I didn't recognize, folding a blouse I'd never seen, placing hotel-sized lotion bottles into the bathroom cabinet like souvenirs. There was a new necklace around her neck, dainty, silver, not her style. It looked like a gift. It looked personal. "You okay?" she asked, catching me watching her. I nodded. "Just tired." She smiled, then kissed my cheek. "You worry too much." That night, after she fell asleep, I sat at the dining table with an empty manila folder. I started printing things, *TS, receipts, camera logs, reservation emails. I titled the folder Answers. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was clarity. I knew. And she didn't know that I knew. I carried that weight for a week. Went through the motions. Washed dishes. Mowed the lawn. Ate dinner beside her like we were still real. She told me stories about work. Asked if we should plan a getaway. I said maybe. She smiled. She was already planning one. Just not with me. Then I did something I never thought I would. I called her sister, Melanie. We weren't close. But Melanie had always liked me. She used to call me the calm in the storm. That night I asked if we could talk in person. We met at a diner halfway between our houses. I brought the folder. She listened without interrupting. Flipped through the pages, the photos, the receipts, the lies. By the end, her hands were trembling. I knew she was drifting, Melanie whispered. But this? I didn't want to believe she'd go this far. I need you to give that to her, I said quietly, sliding the folder back to her. Not today. But soon. She nodded. No questions. No defenses. And just like that, I handed over the truth. 2 days later, I packed a bag and drove north. There was an old cabin we used to visit. Laura and I spent our 3rd anniversary there. It had creaky floors and a busted screen door, but it was quiet. The lake out back stretched endlessly into the tree line, always cold, always still. I sat on the porch for hours, letting it all hit. The reality. The humiliation. The stupid hope that maybe I'd misunderstood everything, even after seeing it with my own eyes. I screamed into the woods that night. Not words. Just sound. Just release. Then I sat by the fire and cried once. Hard. Ugly. Alone. But when the sun came up, I wasn't hollow anymore. I wasn't okay. But I was awake. I didn't tell anyone where I went, not my brother, not my coworkers, not even the neighbor who always waved from across the street. I just drove north with no music, no GPS, no explanation. The cabin welcomed me with that same dry creak in the floorboards, the same draft under the window we never got around to sealing. There was dust on the old picture frame we left behind, me and Laura holding mugs of cider on the porch wrapped in that red plaid blanket. The smile on my face in the photo looked genuine. Back then, it was. I didn't unpack right away. I sat in that rocking chair on the porch and just existed. Let the weight of everything settle into my chest like sediment. The air smelled like pine and lake mist. I watched clouds crawl across the sky and let myself feel nothing. Then everything. I stayed 3 days. On the first day, I was angry. On the second, I felt hollow. On the third, I decided I wasn't going to rage or beg or explode like some cliché. I wouldn't be the man who threw dishes or left venomous voicemails. That wasn't me. And even now, especially now, I wasn't going to lose who I was. I was going to handle this in my way. Not for revenge. For closure. When I got back, the house was still. Laura wasn't home yet. Her conference had run over again. I didn't check the lie. I didn't care to. The silence inside felt different. Not heavy clean. Like a stage before the lights go up. I made tea. Sat at the dining table with the manila folder again. I'd labeled it answers, but now it had become something else. Not a file of evidence. Not a wee asterisk p asterisk n. A map, maybe, of everything I hadn't wanted to see. Every receipt, every silent log, every skipped heartbeat. It told the truth, and the truth was heavy, but it had shape now. I opened my laptop and wrote a letter. It took me 3 hours. I didn't make it angry. I didn't make it poetic. I made it honest. I wrote about the way silence grew between us like mold. About the way I kept turning down my instincts because I wanted to believe her. About how waking up next to her had become the loneliest part of my day. I wrote about the laugh in the cafe. How it didn't just hurt, it changed something inside me. I didn't say her name once in the letter. I referred to her only as you. I printed it, folded it twice, and tucked it into the back of the folder. Then I sealed it and drove it to Melanie's. She opened the door and looked at me like she wanted to say something. Maybe she'd already given Laura the contents. Maybe not. I didn't ask. I just handed her the envelope. Make sure she gets this, I said. But don't tell her where I'm going. Are you okay? She asked. No, I said. But I will be. And I meant it. I went home. Packed a small duffel, just the essentials. No framed photos. No souvenirs. Just clothes, a notebook, the travel guide to Portugal I never got to read, and the little compass Laura had given me our first Christmas together. I kept it because it reminded me who I used to be. Who I wanted to be again. Before I left, I stood in the living room one last time. The sun cut across the hardwood in thick orange lines. The couch still had her throw blanket tossed over the back like she always left it. Her mug was on the counter, half full of cold coffee. I didn't take anything. I didn't write a note. I let the silence speak for me. I drove for 5 hours before I found myself back at the lake. Not the cabin, somewhere quieter. Smaller. A motel built in the 1960s, long since forgotten by Yelp and modern travelers. I paid cash and didn't give my real name. The clerk didn't ask questions. For the first time in months I slept. Not deeply. Not peacefully. But I didn't dream about her. That was something. Over the next few days I made a plan. I found a lawyer. A quiet one. I didn't want a shark or a showman, just someone who would understand that I wasn't out for blood. Just peace. We met in a small office with fake plants and neutral paint. I laid out the folder in front of him. I don't want to drag her through the mud, I said. But I'm not walking away from this like it never happened. He flipped through the evidence slowly, nodding at all the right moments. He said I had a strong case. I said I didn't care about punishment, I just wanted clean lines. I wanted my name off the house, my name off the joint accounts, my name out of the chapter she was already living without me. He nodded again. It can be done, he said. I signed the initial paperwork the next morning. My hands didn't shake. I expected them to. But they were steady. Clear. On the 5th day, I called a realtor. I'm looking for something small, I told her. Not a house. Not anything with a white picket fence. She showed me a boat. At first, I thought it was a joke. A 32-foot sailboat docked in a quiet marina up the coast. Built in the 90s. Cabin big enough for a bed, a stove, and not much else. But there was something about it that made me lean in. It was just enough space for a man who didn't want to be followed. Just enough room for new air, new water, and nothing familiar. I bought it that afternoon. The name painted across the back was Second Wind. I didn't change it. I moved in 2 days later. Sold the truck. Bought a used hatchback that smelled like lemons and dog hair. Gave the rest of my things to charity. Left the house to Laura. I didn't want it anymore. Too many echoes. She didn't call. She didn't text. But I got word from Melanie that she received the folder. She read the letter, she said. Twice. I saw her crying. I didn't ask for more. I didn't want to hear her excuses. Or her regret. Or her attempts at rewinding what she'd already deleted. On the boat, I learned to sit still. To watch the tide instead of the clock. To let the wind tell me where I was going. I started writing, not about her. Not about what she did. But about me. About what it means to be left without being told. About how betrayal isn't always loud. Sometimes it's slow. Sometimes it smiles at you and says you're overthinking it. I wrote in the mornings, watched gulls in the afternoons, and cooked simple food over a single burner stove. Rice. Fish. Bread from the town bakery. One morning, I woke up to a fog so thick I couldn't see the docks. I stepped outside with my coffee and stood at the edge of the deck. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something to crash. The fog didn't scare me. It felt like a clean slate. A few hours later, I met someone. Savannah. She worked at the kayak rental shop 2 piers over. Said she used to be an art teacher but left the school system after it stopped being about kids and started being about test scores. She had paint-stained fingers, sunburned cheeks, and a laugh that didn't sound like she was performing. We talked about nothing. Then we talked about everything. She didn't ask about Laura. She asked what kind of stories I wanted to write. And for the first time I had an answer. I told her I wanted to write about stillness. Not pain. Not grief. Just the quiet you earn after surviving something that tried to break you. She smiled and said, "That's the good kind." A week later, she brought me a compass keychain. Not as a gift. Just because. "You looked like someone who needed reminding," she said. I didn't ask of what. I already knew. I didn't plan on going to the dinner. I hadn't RSVP'd, hadn't even opened the invitation until a day before the event. It was tucked into a stack of mail forwarded to the Marina office, a cream-colored envelope with gold cursive I almost didn't recognize. I turned it over twice before opening it. Inside, an invitation to a local charity auction and dinner hosted by the family of an old friend, Eli Harding. Laura and I had gone the last 2 years. She used to love putting on her red dress, the one with the open back and the slit just high enough to make heads turn. She liked the attention even if she never said it out loud. Back then I liked watching her work a room. She had a way of making people feel like they mattered even if she forgot they existed the next week. I thought about skipping it. What business did I have showing up alone? But something tugged at me. Maybe I just wanted to see if I could stand in the same room as the life I left and not flinch. So I pressed my only good shirt, ran a comb through my hair, and showed up 10 minutes late. The hall was already buzzing. Clinking glasses, smooth jazz humming in the background, the rustle of expensive dresses and polished shoes. Eli spotted me first. His eyes widened, then softened into a real smile. No pity, no awkward hug. Just, well, I'll be damned. Jackson Holloway in the flesh. I shook his hand. "Still have my name badge from last year?" He laughed. "We thought we'd have to retire it." People started to notice me. A few old faces drifted over, some looked surprised, some pleased, some unsure if they should say anything at all. I stayed near the host table, talked when I needed to, smiled when it felt natural. And then I saw her. Laura. She walked in like the air belonged to her, chin lifted, smile set, hand grazing the arm of one of the planning committee members. She wore a navy dress I didn't recognize. Not the red one. This one was safer, more refined. She looked thinner. Paler, maybe? And then her eyes found me. Her smile faltered. For a second, just a second, I saw something raw flash across her face. Then she composed herself. Her gaze steadied. Her lips curved just enough. Not joy. Not warmth. Recognition. She made her way across the room like nothing had changed. "Jackson," she said, stopping just short of touching distance. "I didn't think you'd come." "I could say the same," I replied, voice calm. People around us had started to pay attention. The laughter behind her dipped. Someone 2 tables over glanced, then quickly looked away. "I've been meaning to call," she said quietly. "You sort of disappeared." "You noticed?" I said, eyebrows raised. "You were pretty busy the last time I saw you." Her face twitched. "Not enough for anyone else to see. Just me. That little crack in the mirror." She started, then stopped. "I don't want to do this here." "Then don't," I said. She blinked. "I didn't come to make a scene." "You don't need to," I said evenly. "Everyone's already watching." She turned slightly, like she just then realized the room had shifted. Her posture straightened, her chin lifted again. But the shine in her eyes dimmed. "Well," she said after a pause, "I'm glad you're doing okay." "I am," I said. "Better than okay, actually." There was a silence between us. Not the kind that begs to be filled, but the kind that means something is ending. Then I stepped aside. Literally. I took a step back and let someone else pass between us. Her attempt to stand next to me, to pose as if we were still some kind of team, failed right there. A few guests watched that moment like they knew what it meant. I saw Eli glance toward us, then look down at his drink. Laura lingered for another second, then walked to the opposite side of the room. Found a seat near the stage. Alone. She didn't cry. She didn't storm out. She just sat there, a little quieter than usual. And that's when I realized something had shifted. The aura she used to wear like perfume, that quiet control, the charisma that once drew people to her like moths, it didn't land the same. It bounced off. The illusion was broken, and people could feel it. Throughout the evening, she kept glancing over. Maybe expecting me to come talk to her. Maybe waiting for the part where I let her explain, the part where I give her closure she hadn't earned. I didn't move. Instead, I talked to the new people, Eli's cousin from Asheville, a guy named Tom who was fundraising for an environmental nonprofit. We got into a conversation about microplastics in the ocean. I listened. I laughed. I offered to donate. I belong there. Not as Laura's husband. Not as the betrayed man. As me. When the dinner ended and the chairs scraped across the floor in that final, quiet rush, Laura stood near the exit. Her eyes followed me as I passed. She didn't stop me. But someone else did. Mark. An old coworker of hers. We'd met a few times over barbecues and Christmas parties. Always polite, always reserved. That night, he stopped me near the coat check. "Jackson," he said. "Do you have a second?" "Sure." He looked around, lowered his voice. I didn't know if I should say anything. But I figured you deserved to know. Know what? He pulled out his phone and opened a message thread. "I don't know what Laura's told you, but she's been spinning a story at work for months. Different stories, really." He scrolled through the messages, texts, **TS, snippets of conversations. In one, she told a colleague she was separated. In another, she claimed she was divorced and living alone. The one that stuck with me most? He suspects nothing. He still kisses my forehead like I'm his future. It hit harder than I expected. Not because it was shocking, but because it confirmed what I already knew. This wasn't just cheating. It was erasure. She had rewritten me out of her life to suit whatever fantasy she wanted to sell. "She told someone you were sick," Mark added. "That you were emotionally unstable. That's why you didn't show up to her last work event." I stared at the floor for a moment. Then I looked up. "Thanks," I said. "You didn't have to tell me." He nodded, awkward. "I just thought you should hear it from someone who doesn't want anything from you." We shook hands. I left. Outside, the night was cold but clear. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the steering wheel. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just sat there and let the final nail press gently into place. She hadn't just betrayed me. She tried to replace me. And suddenly, I wasn't angry, I was free. The night after the dinner, I couldn't sleep. Not because of Laura or even the way she looked at me across that hall. It was Mark's message that kept replaying in my mind, the way she had rewritten our story for others. Not just the cheating, not just the lies. She'd turned me into a footnote in a version of her life that made more sense to her audience. In one world, she was divorced. In another, widowed. In some circles, I never existed at all. And in every version, she was the victim. I couldn't explain how it felt to be erased while still breathing. It wasn't rage that hit me, it was clarity. What I had been mourning wasn't Laura. It was a woman who hadn't existed in a long time. Maybe never. A few days later, I bumped into a mutual acquaintance at the dockside market. He knew Laura from her company's supplier events. Without prompting, he mentioned how she used to show up alone, talk about rebuilding, how she'd survived a toxic relationship. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because she had turned me into her villain to justify her escape hatch. I went back to the boat that night, sat with my notebook, and wrote 2 words. It's over. Not just the marriage. The obsession. The grief. The wondering. The fantasy that she'd come back sorry and human. It was gone. Laura left town not long after. No calls. No apology. No final argument. Just vanished like a storm that overstayed its welcome. I sold the house. Every drawer, every closet, every shadow of us was cleared out. I kept only what I came into the marriage with and what I'd built after, the boat, the notebooks, and peace. The marina became home. My mornings were defined by tide and light instead of silence and suspicion. I made friends with other people who lived on the water, fishermen, seasonal workers, travelers passing through. No one asked where I'd come from. No one needed to. Then came Savannah. She was easy to miss at first, quiet, sun-warmed, a little paint always on her hands. She gave kayaking tours on weekends, fixed her own equipment, and wore the kind of calm you can't fake. We met by accident. Literally. She dropped a waterproof speaker into the water near my boat and climbed aboard to fish it out. We laughed, talked for a few minutes, and that turned into coffee. Then long walks. Then late nights on the dock watching the stars flicker like Morse code. She never asked about Laura. I never brought her up. Savannah only asked, "What brings you peace?" It was the first time I'd thought about that. Not what hurt me. Not what I survived. What healed me. I told her the truth, stillness, and honesty. She smiled like she understood. Because she did. Months passed like water, unforced, quiet, free. And one breezy morning, as I sat on the deck with coffee in hand, I wrote a letter. I didn't send it to Laura directly. I sent it to her sister. Inside was a simple postcard. On it, a single line. This time, I didn't wait for the storm to pass. I built a life that doesn't fear the wind. Tucked behind it was a photo. Me, smiling not at the camera but at something just out of frame. Holding a compass. Standing on my boat. Alive.